begin with our segment 2 of what Mary did not know with the counter arguments given by various philosophers. To begin with, we have been discussing about the non-materialistic account of mind, and we have seen that the non-materialistic account of mind holds qualia and epiphenomenal qualia are the two most significant modus operandi on which their entire philosophy is based. To counter-argue and make debates in philosophy of mind more fruitful, we have the physicalists like Denett and others who asks Jackson to reconsider his view. Now we would be discussing about the Robomary, which is a response to Jackson's What Mary Did Not Know. Robomary and What Mary Did Not Know are the two thought experiments related to philosophy of mind, particularly around the nature of consciousness and subjective experience. Let's dive into how they connect, particularly through Denett's critique. What Mary did not know, the knowledge argument, as we have seen in our previous segment, has been a thought experiment introduced by philosopher Frank Jackson in 1982 to argue against physicalism, the idea that everything about the mind can be explained in terms of physical facts. The scenario which was built up was Mary is a brilliant scientist who has learned everything there is to know about the physical facts of color perception, wavelengths, neural processes while living in a black and white room. She has never experienced color herself. The question when Mary leaves the room and sees red for the first time, does she learn something new? What it is like to experience redness? Jackson argued that even though Mary knows all the physical facts, she gains new knowledge, the quality of red. Therefore, physicalism must be incomplete. Robomary. In response to thought experiments like Mary's, Denett introduced Robomary in an attempt to debunk the idea that Mary learns something new when she experiences redness for the first time. Denett argues that if Mary had truly understood everything about color vision and the brain, she wouldn't be surprised by the experience of redness. She would be able to simulate or predict what it would feel like using her vast knowledge. Robomary is a hypothetical robotic version of Mary. If Robomary were programmed with all the physical knowledge of color vision, including detailed knowledge of neural and psychological processes, Robomary would be able to see color without ever having been a colored environment. This suggests that if someone like Mary knows everything physical, there should be no surprise or new knowledge when she sees red. The debate centers on the nature of qualia, which refers to the subjective phenomenal qualities of experience. Jackson's Mary experiment was designed to show that qualia cannot be reduced to physical facts. Denett, on the other hand, denies the existence of qualia as something mysterious or ineffable. He argues that what we think of as redness can be fully explained through physical processes and that Mary wouldn't be surprised if she truly had comprehensive knowledge of those processes. Denett suggests that the concept of redness as a subjective experience is not something additional to the physical facts, but is part of the physical description. He argues that our intuitions about Mary learning something new comes from a mistaken way of thinking about the mind. So Denett's position is very clear. The critique of the Mary argument is rooted in his materialistic and functionalist view of the mind. He believes that consciousness and subjective experiences like redness are emergent properties of physical processes and that if Mary knew everything physical, she would already know what it feels like to see red. He uses Robomary to show that for a machine with complete physical knowledge of color, there would be no gap in understanding. Robomary can process and understand color without needing to experience it directly. So, what are the key differences between Robomary and Jackson's Mary experiment? Robomary is a fully mechanistic entity that, according to Denett, would not experience any new information when exposed to color because all the physical and functional knowledge about color perception is already embedded in her. Mary, the human, in Jackson's original thought experiment, learns something new when she steps out and sees red because the physical knowledge alone, according to Jackson, doesn't give her the qualitative experience of seeing color. For Denett, the redness of red is not some mysterious non-physical property, but something that can be fully described by the physical science of perception. He argues that the experience of seeing red is just the brain processing light of a particular wavelength, and once you understand that processing fully, there is nothing more to be surprised by. What Mary did not know claims that there is something about subjective experience, qualia, that cannot be fully captured by physical facts. Robomary challenges this by suggesting that complete physical knowledge would include the ability to understand and predict the experience of seeing red without any subjective gap. So, the debate between Robomary and what Mary did not know, the key philosophical insights on the point of convergence and divergence are the following. The debate represents a rich philosophical discussion about the nature of consciousness, qualia, and the limits of physicalism. Let's break down the key insights of convergence and divergence between the two thought experiments. The first, Mary did not know in Jackson's The Original Thought Experiment suggests that experiential knowledge is distinct from physical knowledge. Mary, despite knowing all physical facts about color vision, lacks the subjective experience of seeing color. This implies that physicalism is incomplete because it cannot account for the subjective, what it is like aspect of consciousness. Robomary, Denett argues that if Mary or Robomary had complete physical knowledge, she would already understand the experience of seeing red. According to Denett, physical knowledge can, in principle, account for every aspect of consciousness, including the subjective experience. The idea of qualia as something extra is an illusion born out of incomplete understanding. Convergence, both the scenarios recognize that there is a distinction between types of knowledge, theoretical versus practical or experiential, but they diverge in their interpretation of the importance of this distinction. Jackson's experiment claims that there is a special non-physical kind of knowledge, qualia, that Mary gains when she experiences color, while Denett argues that complete physical knowledge is sufficient and qualia are not separate or mysterious. The core of Jackson's argument is the existence of qualia, the raw, subjective experience of perception. According to this view, experiencing redness gives Mary new knowledge, thus proving that subjective experience, qualia, cannot be reduced to physical information. Denett rejects the idea of qualia as something irreducible. He argues that if Mary truly had all the physical information, she would not experience anything new when she saw red. He proposes that our intuitions about qualia arise from misunderstandings about how the brain processes information. The redness is simply the way the brain interprets certain wavelengths of light and nothing more. Convergence, both agree that the experience of red is something that humans can describe and discuss, but they diverge on whether the experience involves non-physical properties. Jackson sees qualia as a fundamental challenge to physicalism, while Denett sees qualia as explainable within a physicalist framework, considering them as part of the brain's functional organization. Experience plays a central role in consciousness, and it is something that cannot be fully captured by physical descriptions. When Mary sees red for the first time, she gains a new irreducible kind of knowledge, what it is like to see red, even though she already knows everything physically describable about color vision. Robomary, Denett. Denett argues that if Mary's physical knowledge were truly complete, she wouldn't need the experience of seeing red to understand it. Her experience of redness would simply be the confirmation of her knowledge rather than the acquisition of something new. Experience, in Denett's view, can be fully explained by physical processes and stimulations, so Robomary could know what it is like to see red without ever experiencing it. Convergence. Both recognize that experience is central to the way we understand consciousness, but they differ in their view of its significance. Divergence. Jackson's argument relies on the idea that experience reveals something new and essential that is missed by physical knowledge, whereas Denett believes experience doesn't reveal anything beyond what can be explained by physical science. Mary did not know. Jackson's argument or thought experiment, thus we understand by now, is primarily a challenge to physicalism, arguing that if there is something Mary learns when she experiences red, it means physicalism is incomplete. There is more to consciousness than just the physical facts. Robomary, Denett, defends physicalism by suggesting that the idea Mary learned something new is based on a misunderstanding. In his view, physicalism is sufficient to explain every aspect of consciousness, including what it feels like to see red. He argues that the intuition that Mary learned something new is flawed because it assumes that experiential knowledge is something separate from physical knowledge. Both the scenarios explore the scope of physicalism's ability to explain consciousness but arrive at opposite conclusions. Jackson argues that physicalism leaves something out, Qualia, while Denett maintains that physicalism, when understood properly, can account for everything, including consciousness and subjective experience. Jackson's thought experiment assumes that no amount of physical knowledge can allow Mary to imagine or simulate what it is like to see red. There is something about the direct experience of color that cannot be prefigured by knowledge alone. Denett counters that if Mary or Robomary had all the relevant physical information, she would be able to imagine what seeing red feels like. Denett believes that with the right cognitive mechanisms, it is possible to simulate experiences internally, meaning that complete physical knowledge would allow Mary to anticipate and understand the experience of red without actually having to see it. Both thought experiments highlight the difficulty of imagining subjective experiences without having lived them, but they part ways on whether imagination or simulation can fully replace direct experience. Jackson's view implies that no amount of imagination can replace the first-hand experience of Qualia, while Denett believes that if the brain is understood correctly, imagination and simulation can fully replicate subjective experiences. Both agree on the importance of consciousness and the challenge of explaining it. The thought experiments are built around the puzzle of understanding consciousness, especially the subjective aspects. Both acknowledge the distinction between physical and experiential knowledge. They both recognize that there is a difference between knowing the science behind something and experiencing it firsthand, though they disagree on the implications of this difference. The existence of Qualia. Jackson's argument depends on Qualia being something non-physical and irreducible, while Denett argues that Qualia don't represent anything beyond the physical processes in the brain. The completeness of physical knowledge. Jackson's thought experiment aims to show that physical knowledge is incomplete when it comes to explaining consciousness, while Denett argues that if physicalism is fully understood, it can explain all aspects of experience. The role of experience versus imagination. Jackson emphasizes the importance of first-hand experience for understanding qualia, while Denett suggests that imagination or simulation can replicate the experience. In a sense, this debate reflects a broader discussion in philosophy of mind whether consciousness and subjective experience qualia can be fully understood through physical processes or whether they point to something beyond the physical. So, beyond the Mary argument and Robomary, the philosophical insights that one might be interested to delve into makes us understand that one understands the limitation of physicalism, the nature of subjective experience, and the role of knowledge. The Mary argument challenges physicalism, suggesting that the complete physical description of the world is insufficient to account for subjective experience or qualia. The idea is that even with all the physical facts, something about conscious experience remains unexplained. In contrast, Robomary's attempts to preserve physicalism by arguing that complete physical knowledge could allow one to understand subjective experiences, thus closing the supposed gap. The epistemic gap versus the ontological gap. The debate goes beyond whether Mary learned something new, epistemic knowledge, where she experiences red, to whether this suggests that there is an ontological gap, meaning that there are aspects of reality like qualia that are fundamentally non-physical. Epistemic gap, Mary does not have all the knowledge needed to predict experience. Ontological gap, qualia themselves are non-physical entities, irreducible to physical facts. So, philosophical questions beyond the Mary argument could be like, does an epistemic gap or a gap in what we know necessarily imply an ontological gap? A gap what there is? If qualia are real, what kind of entities are they? Are they non-physical or simply misunderstood physical properties? The concept of qualia is definitely central to both arguments. Jackson's Mary experiment suggests that qualia, like the experience of redness, are fundamentally different from physical descriptions. Denett's Robomary attempts to debunk this notion, arguing that once we fully understand the physical processes, there is no extra what it feels like left to explain. Some philosophers like David Chalmers, with the hard problem of consciousness, argue that qualia are irreducible and fundamentally non-physical. The what it is like aspect of consciousness cannot be explained by physical facts alone. Denett's view suggests that qualia are not some extra property beyond physicalism, but can be explained through functional or neurobiological processes. He sees qualia as emergent properties reducible to the interactions between the brain processes. So, understanding this debate, we see that in philosophy of mind, questions would continue, and as long as there are questions, the very activity of philosophy would be alive. Vis-a-vis the non-materialistic and the materialistic responses of Frank Jackson's Mary and Robomary of Daniel Dennett, the other possible questions that one could be interested beyond the debate could be, are qualia an intrinsic part of the physical world, just misunderstood, or are they really something there for us to take cognizance? With this, today we come to an end with our debate on the non-materialistic account of mind, Frank Jackson's What Mary Did Not Know, and Robomary of Daniel Dennett. Thank you so much.